Great. Well, thank you very much. That's a great overall orientation. Since I'm the moderator, I'm going to be responsible for watching the chat window, and when Al pauses, I'll ask him the questions up to that time. Then when we are done, we'll transition to the raised hand, and I'll just call on you to ask the questions. That way we avoid everybody trying to talk at once. Even in a small group with just 12 people as we have today, uh, if everyone tries to talk at once, it gets kind of hard to hear what anyone's saying. So that's why we do it that way. So let me go ahead and introduce our speaker. Al Floer was in the Navy for a while back, quite a while back, and he happened to be in Japan on one of his trips, and he just bought a camera and started taking pictures. He enjoyed taking pictures, got out of the Navy, went off and worked in electronics for 33 years, kept taking pictures, showed one of his pictures to one of his coworkers, and coworker opened his door into his office and showed all the wonderful pictures he took as a professional photographer at Road Atlanta, and then took Al under his wing and kind of showed him how to take pictures of race cars on the racetrack. And so Al's been doing that for quite a while now. He retired and then decided to go ahead and become a professional photographer and do that. So he spends a lot of time at racetracks taking pictures. He loves to do it. And I think Road Atlanta is his home track, and Road Atlanta is a wonderful track for taking pictures, great access to good views. So he shoots pictures as much as he can. And this, the thought for this presentation came out of our family picnic last September, when Al came up to me and said, "Hey, I'd like to do a photography seminar." I know he had done one for us, I think in 2017, but that's getting a while back. And so we decided to schedule this. As I mentioned earlier, this was going to be in person at Mercedes of Augusta, and we were going to have food from Reinhardt's next door. Of course, the virus got in the way, and that didn't work out quite that way. But that gives us the advantage of being able to share with other sections, and we're so glad to have folks from across the country joining us today. So Al, go ahead, and we'll shift over to you. I will stand by, and when you pause for questions, I'll ask you whatever questions we have up to that time. For those that have questions, just go ahead and chat to everyone, and I'll watch the chat window since it gets pretty hard to do a presentation and chat. I'll take care of that part. So Al, over to you, and thank you for being willing to do this.
Sure. Welcome, everybody. Like Gary said, this is my second time doing this, and it's a little bit different than doing it in person. So we already had a little practice session of trying to get your reactions and trying to present the presentation to you so that you don't fall asleep. I hope I don't lose anybody. You enjoy it and you learn something. And Gary, I've got my chat windows open, but I may be moving to my second and third screens, so I may not see it. So I will be pausing at various times to get questions. I've got some specific spots I want to stop and make sure we got everybody up to that point, understanding as much as we can. I don't expect everybody to understand quite the depth of how your camera works, and we'll discuss about a couple different types of cameras. We'll even use the iPhone or your Android phone. They work fairly close to being the same, but I'll cover some of those basics. It's pretty amazing what our phones can do now compared to 8-9 years ago, when we used to carry around those small little cameras, and we couldn't get it out in time to get that one shot right there on the spot. And now we got our phones with us, so we do have what I call a picture taker. I don't qualify them yet as a camera, but they are really amazing of what they've done with the glass that they use and the sensors and the noise reduction that's improved. I'll also go into the prosumer, what they call professional consumer cameras, which are the in-between between the phone and a professional digital through the lens reflex type camera that we see the pros use and things like this. I'm not going to go into large format digital cameras. That's way out of our range and probably not even it's not even for our discussion. This discussion is for you to try how to take better pictures and use your camera and not put it in the program mode. I want you to hopefully after this presentation, we get you out of the P mode, we get you out of the A mode, and the closer we can get you to manual mode using your camera, you will see an improvement in your pictures and what you can do with them. So we'll go from that. So what I will do is everybody got the presentation? If not, we'll be presenting it on screen. Stop sharing. Let's go to my camera. What I want to do is talk about is the photos, the phone cameras, and there's several different modes in here. If you do use that with your phone, and there's some unique things that some people don't realize. The flash, even on these phones, are very important when you have a shadow in your face. You've seen you've taken a picture and you go, wow, the face didn't come out right because the sun was in a position where it highlighted a spot higher, it's brighter than your face, and the sensor picks up the brightness and adjusts everything according to that brightness, and your face may be a little bit darker. So what the thing to do is to always use your flash, even when you're outdoors. It's amazing what your flash will do. It'll do what they call a fill. And what it does, it fills the picture with a flash just like the sun was behind you. We always can't get the shot where we want the sun behind us all the time. So think about using that as a possibility. One of the other things that's on there is this thing called HDR, high dynamic range. That's where you got darks and brights that are in a wide range, and your camera has a hard time adjusting for it. And if you go to HDR, it actually brightens up the darks and lightens the lights so that you get a more balanced picture. Things like that will be like if you're in the woods hiking, and there's bright sunshine coming through the trees like you're photographing the river, but yet the foliage in front of the river is not quite as bright as the background. So using this feature called HDR, which is also on the higher end cameras, is a nice feature to use so that you get better pictures with your phone. So other than that, the phones are, like I say, great picture takers, and I won't spend a whole lot of time on here. I think what we'd like to do is learn how to use our more expensive cameras when we're trying to take a really nice shot of cars, like I do at racing, or even nature on photographs, or like Diane had of her picture earlier. How do we get those shots? And they just don't come because you go out there and snap it in automatic mode. It just doesn't happen. So the next thing I'll do is I'll talk about, and I hope everybody can see this thing. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it with the reflection in the background, but it's a prosumer type camera. This is my dive camera, and I've got a case that goes around it, and I've used it down to about 120 feet. And a lot of the nice features that are on it are just like your DSLR. It has all the automatic modes. It has the different ISO speeds for your camera we'll talk about. It has other features on here of back to film days even. It relates to that. The flash is sort of automatic. They have shoes on them for flashes even. So even though this has a flash in front, it's not quite the same if you were to have a full type flash on your camera. If you were to buy something like this, almost all of them do come with a flash mount. The better, if you're going to buy a specific camera, try to buy a flash that is made specifically for that. Don't try to use another off-brand thing that doesn't quite talk to the camera. They will be much better if you get the brand or one that was made specifically as an off-brand, which is fine, that will match your camera for the software so that they talk together each other. And then once again, we'll go back to the old standby, the new digital SLRs, and I'll relate back to film a little bit. And as I go through the presentation, we'll talk about how photography evolved from art. Photography is an art. It is an acquired art, just like drawing and painting is. You got to use this as your tool, and that's what I'm going to try to get through today, is how to use this as a tool to bring what you see in your eyes, to bring it back to life, so when you go back, you can say, oh, this picture was really great, the sunset was great, and everybody's going, well, did you get a picture? No, not quite. It's not quite the same thing, and that's what we try to do with our cameras, is show somebody else not how good we are, but how that moment that we try to capture. And as Gary mentioned earlier, when I was overseas, I was going everywhere, and I may not ever go back to those places, but I've got pictures of me and the other guys that in my group that we went out and toured the different parts of the countries where I've been, Africa, the middle of the Indian Ocean, and the Asia countries was just phenomenal to capture those. And every time I look back at them, go, oh yeah, I remember that, or remember this about that. So anyways, let's go into the presentation. And let's see, screen one, share. And we should be doing that. All right, there we go. All right, so Gary, I can't see the screen things up here, but I do have my stopping points that I'll go through here again. As Gary talked about a little bit my experience, but what I want to make people feel is comfortable using their cameras and don't feel intimidated by buttons or technology. You know, we're in control of the technology. We can always unplug the TV, whatever it may be, unplug the computer. We can turn the camera off if it's giving us a hard time. What I want to also convey is how to understand the camera, how the camera works, and features of the camera. I'm going to try to make it simple because the sensor and a lot of this stuff is really related to physics. We have light, we have what we call perspective, and I'll talk about that here in just a second. We've got the shutter speed, which is the timing of how much light we're going to let in a specific amount of time, and the aperture, which is the type of way to explain that is called our depth of field. There's a thing in your middle of your lens that sort of closes down and makes it a small aperture. The bigger the aperture, which is actually a fraction of the number, so an f1.4 is actually a very wide focal aperture, whereas an f22 gets very narrow. And if you can imagine doing that with your eyes, you get a wide angle of view, and then as you go down, it sort of blocks out the amount of light. And if you block out more light, well, it's harder for the sensor to pick up. Understanding capturing that moment or scene, I think we all understand that. So that we're trying to capture that specific moment where we're at, whether it's planned for that sunset or the sunrise, or for that particular, we're out in nature and all of a sudden a strange, colorful bird comes up. Or if you're down in Florida where I've been, where all of a sudden you go around a corner on a boat or at the golf course and there's a alligator just hanging out. Hopefully they're just hanging out and not chasing you. The other thing we'll talk about is capturing what you saw and getting that on camera. Framing that shot will give perspectives of how to not cut off the head, how to not cut off the feet, and get what you're trying to bring to the next person that sees your particular shot. We'll talk back, like I mentioned, photography, how it relates back to your art and painting and perspective and perception. Back in the early days of art, if you'll go back, and I don't have the flows of here, the early days, if you go back to around 800 to around 1200, where people were doing any sort of paintings, it was, things were not of the perspective of depth of field or size. Things were, one person was taller than the other, or their shoulders were much wider, the head wasn't the same size compared to the body. If you looked at something far away, the mountains or the background were just a little bit different. And then all of a sudden, a few artists started thinking about perception and starting putting things better and better into what they call the perspective of size. And that's what our camera captures. We've gone well past trying to get what our eye sees and put it on the camera. Early art was flat and non-perspective is what my point is. Renaissance had opened up a period of people looking into linear perspective, making sure that, and I wish I had my displays with me. I did not do that, and I'm sorry about that, but when I was talking about it at the last class, I sort of just did it by my hands. The linear perspective is that the depth of field, like a circle of people, actually showed that the people in the back were slightly a little bit smaller than people close to you, and that's what your eye perceives. And once that got into the right perspective, all of a sudden art started showing exactly what the artist wanted to point out there. Another thing that we look at is vanishing points. and why they're important to our perception and the perspective. Vanishing point pictures are very nice for landscapes, very nice to tell you distance, also to tell you the shape of things. It also pulls your eye into where your focal point is, and we'll get to that with one of my pictures that I'll show later on. All right, so why are we capturing the moments to share with others? Well, it's always nice to share those experiences. You go on a nice trip to Hawaii or Asia, Hong Kong, Australia. You want to bring back those pictures and share with people. Not everybody gets to travel around the world, even though we are more world travelers these days. It's still nice to share other areas where we've been with other people. One thing that intrigued me was how to use the camera and how we can get various types of pictures. And we'll talk about some of those things on how the camera's perspective, the focal length of the camera, the zooming out, zooming in, will give us different perceptions of what the picture was and what we're trying to capture. And like Gary said, I was traveling in the Navy and I wanted to capture everywhere I went. So a place I'd never been before. Prices were cheap and introduction to good cameras and camera. Like I said, everybody, all the sailors had one, and it was just one of those things to do. Stereos and camera equipment were what loaded down the ship as we were coming back. Other things that always intrigue people is nature shots, not just people, and the color possibilities, sunsets, sunrises, flowers, birds, and things like this. And also, I got involved with racing back when I was, I don't know, a lot of boys built cars, model cars and stuff, and I think I built my first Jackie Stewart car in 1963. It was the Lotus that had just won the Formula One race, and I put that together. I don't remember how well it actually worked, but anyways, that's how I got involved with car racing. Okay, so sometimes the pictures are good, many times not so good. Well, with film, many photographers knew that every time you snapped the camera, it was going to cost dollars. With digital, we just snap away. Some put it in high-speed capture mode, and you're really not capturing anything because it's snapping away automatically. So one of the things that we're going to look at is things that make up the scene: the light, the perspective, back again to the perception, and the focus. Sometimes we don't want the whole picture to be in focus. We want to focus on one small part of something. A good example is the front of a pack of cars. You may want to only do the front of cars. Or if you're taking a picture at a concours event, you may want to take the picture of the front headlights. Many Mercedes have great different perspectives on the headlights, the chrome around them, but you really don't want to look at all the other stuff, so you may focus on the front of the car, and I've got a picture as an example. You may focus on the front of the car and get that headlight, but use a smaller f-stop, and we'll talk about that in a second. That will give you the headlight and the focus and maybe a little ornament that's right there by the headlight that maybe tell it what type of car it is. Ford Mustangs had the 289 right there over the front, in front of the front fender well and right by the headlight, and you could get it, tell everybody knew that particular car. You've seen 289, you've seen the headlight, and Ford guys loved that because they knew that was a Ford headlight, just like we know Mercedes headlights. How our eye differs from the camera's dynamic range. Our eye has something like 10 times the dynamic range of what today's sensors are that can pick up a picture fairly in the dark even, but our eyes are even more perceptive to dynamic range. So what we see in our eyes, we have to learn how to adjust our cameras to try to capture that same color scheme, that same shadows and light in certain areas. We talked about the phone, the point and shoot, which was the older cameras. I don't even have one anymore, but that was basically you pulled it out, hit the button, you didn't even look at the focus, you just pointed it and it just focused and done. Talked about the prosumer. We're going to talk about the DSLR cameras, lens, the sensors, and the focus systems. They've really improved almost every year. At some point, the sensors are getting so many megapixels, there has become what you would call a knee. At some point, the megapixels don't make sense anymore, and they actually are degrading the picture quality of what you can get. So we'll talk about that also. The relationship of film to a digital world. Film was, like I said, it was one of those things you learned a lot from film because you didn't waste your time taking pictures. You waited to the exact spot, and at the racetrack, if you didn't get it, you didn't snap it. I've probably, I don't know how much money I spent, but I probably took about 40,000 pictures with my first film camera, and I've got most of the negatives, and I'd say about 60% of them are not so good. But with film, unless you were in the dark room, you really couldn't bring out some of those spots that the film captured. It was just too expensive to do that. The digital world really brought explosion to photography, to everybody. We've all got our phones have a camera on them. There's some people that still have flip phones. Yeah, I played golf with a guy yesterday. He says, "Why do I need another type of phone?" Okay, but anyways, it really opened the world to photography because you can get a fairly decent camera, used cameras for $200–300, lenses for $200–300, sometimes a little bit more, and you can go out there and play with it and take better pictures if you really wanted to go and explore that. And that's what I hope to show today is the ability to use those cameras. And you don't need to buy a $1,000 or $2,000 camera if you're just learning to do that. And that's what we're trying to do today, is also show that very good pictures can be taken with older cameras, older lenses, and even the prosumer cameras. We can get very nice pictures. And we can, as we get better, we can evaluate whether we want to spend more money on a camera. So anyways, I'll talk about the lens quality. Lens quality is really about the glass. The glass is dollars. There's a lot of reasons why the cheaper lenses are made of plastic. And plastic is very good if you take care of it. They're not as airtight. They do get dust in them. It's very amazing of what they can do with plastics these days. And it makes the lens very light. But glass costs money. And the best glass is usually the Leica. Started it years ago. They found out the best way to get a good picture and good, less distortion was with their glass. And they really set the standard for quality of glass. And believe it or not, when iPhone a few years ago decided to really upgrade their cameras and their software and their sensor, they went to Leica and actually used Leica glass in their phones. And that's what improved the quality of these phones now. They started realizing, hey, the glass is that important. And if we're going to improve these sensors, we got to improve the glass. So that's now what we have our picture takers doing such good pictures. And I've hit on it a minute ago, was the sensor size. It does matter. The sensor cell, which I'll cover here in a minute, is an X by Y coordinate. And as you can imagine, just imagine it's a 1 by 1 inch coordinate. If you had 5 or 10 squares in there, it would all be divided up equally into 10 squares, and each one of those cells would be able to capture a lot of light. If you divide it up into 10 megapixels, each one of those squares got smaller and smaller, and now the ability to capture light is a lot tougher. I'll put it on the reverse side. Can you imagine a square 1 inch? It was a flashlight that had one bright light at 1 inch. It's going to be very bright to you. Now, if you got it down to where they're the size of an LED and they were very, very small, you wouldn't have quite the same brightness. So think about your sensor cell as being the same way. It can't capture the same color rendition. It can't cover and capture the same color saturation. So when people go past, they found the sweet spot was around 20 megapixels. When anything more than that, unless you go to a large format camera, it's really a waste of money. It's a marketing ploy to say that we've got the most megapixels, just like horsepower. My horsepower will outrun your horsepower, but at a certain point, it becomes useless. All right, is there any questions at this point, Gary?
Yes, we had one question right up at the beginning from Jim Fichetti, and it was when you were talking about the HDR function on the iPhones, and his question was, should you leave the phone in HDR on, or is auto best?
Well, it's usually for auto, but what you may want to do is play with it, experiment with some things that are specifically got some dark zones. And a good example would be like a bedroom that has, and I'll go into this, I'll show you something a little bit later, that has some dark shadows in it. Don't use the flash, use it as a normal picture, and then go do an HDR picture, and you'll start seeing the differences in what the HDR does. Go outside and find a very bright, like shade, like a very bright day where the sun is and shade is very dark compared to the sunlight, and use something that is light in the background. A good example would be like a garage door that is white, and you've got brick siding and you've got shadows on the siding. And if you were to take a picture there with HDR and with HDR off, see that, you'll start seeing those comparisons. So I would not say leave it on completely. It uses more battery for one thing when you're taking pictures, because it's a higher function that the phone has to do. But experiment and play with it. But that's a good question, is the HDR feature, is try that out. It's really a lot about experimenting and taking pictures. And as you know how to use that, now that you see that it's there, you'll start using it, and you'll find over time that which pictures are going to need that, which pictures will need the flash, and which pictures are all right. So, but good question. So, all right, so I'll continue on. If there's, Gary, were you all right with any more questions?
Well, the only other comment was from Gary Sumiluk, who said, thanks for the presentation. He said it really explained a lot about light speed and everything. Just a comment.
Okay, thank you. That was my whole point today, is not make it too deep in physics and get it in simple terms where everybody can understand, and really understand when you go to buy a camera what these things are marketing terms to get you to buy something. Because marketing, I'm an engineer, marketing people tend to lie a lot. But we have to work together as engineers and sales and marketing and engineers to make a product, and we all got to work together, and that's part of the buy-off. You know, marketing says one thing and engineers say you can't do it. But anyways, that's another subject. Here's a sensor size comparison. And here is what we used to call, and we call this the 1-to-1 ratio, is 35 millimeter. This is what we call our baseline as a comparison back to the days of using film. So film was 35 millimeter, and we've got lots of different formats. As you can see, we've got Canon, we've got some Nikon, Pentax, Sony, we've got another Canon down here. We've got things that we don't see that much anymore, but these were in the prosumer. The prosumer was down here in this area here, 1.7 up to the Fivion Sigma type of things, where these sensors are smaller and smaller. That Canon prosumer that I showed you just now, this was the size of that sensor compared to a 35 millimeter. So if you can imagine this little sensor trying to pick up all those same pixels as this, it is somewhere in the vicinity of 1/20th the square area as a full frame. And as you get smaller and smaller into our phones are smaller even than this one, they can only pick up so much. That's why you can't take a picture from your phone and try to expand it up to an 11/14. You might get an 8/10 out of it if you're lucky, and it was really good color rendition. You might be able to go up to 8/10, but can you imagine going from a sensor that is this size up to 8/10 inches? You're expanding that, and those pixels are only so big. And when you expand that many pixels into that size in 8/10, you're really starting to lose the edges, which is the sharpness of our pictures. A lot of Canons and Nikons that are lower than what they call a full frame, this is their ratio of their size. It's usually about 1.5, 1.62 to 1.9, but these are the two popular ones. They call small, they're just smaller than full frame. And they sort of give you an enhancement, like it's your lens is actually an extended lens. A 50 millimeter becomes, at a 1.5 now becomes a 75 millimeter. It doesn't change your picture quality. It doesn't do anything. People say you get more focal length on it. It's really not. It's just the way the lens and the sensor depth and the way it focuses on that gives you that ratio. But anyways, you'll notice that the sensor is smaller, but a lot bigger than what you've got down here in this area. So these cameras, and I use them out at the racetrack a lot, are just as good as these. And don't let anybody tell you that if you don't have a full frame, you can't really take good pictures. I've proven some guys that said that to me, and then I showed them my pictures, and they were oohing and awing over, and I told them, oh, by the way, that came from a small sensor, and they sort of left me alone. But anyways, real quick question, does anybody have any questions on the sensor size? And we'll talk about that as we continue to go on. But these are some of the spots I want to ask questions on.
There's no questions in the chat right now.
Go ahead, Gary.
No, there's no questions in the chat right now.
Okay, all right. So what we've got is all these camera things that we've got that I've talked about already. We got shutter speed, aperture, the light effect at the end of the picture. All that is going to relate, and I've got some things that if you haven't already gone through the presentation, we'll talk about how that all affects and how they play the game together. You get more light, you got to use a faster shutter speed. Or if you want to get a narrower depth of field, the focus area of how deep they are, you'll change your f-stop. We've got this thing called auto mode, and I'm going to try to get you away from using that auto mode because it balances everything out. Light, the depth of field, the focus, and it may not be really what you want to capture. It might be all right to capture group photos or just a landscape picture that you're right, like your backyard, your front yard, or you want to take something at the Concourse where you want to get the whole picture in the shot. But once you start using these other modes, and we're going to go over those, you'll start finding your cameras easier to use. Your picture quality is going to go up, and you will feel very comfortable using what we call manual mode, or aperture priority, or shutter speed priority. So this is what the modes of the camera are. If you look at your cameras, you might be able to see that button on there. I don't know if you can see mine, but the little button here that has your different features of what the modes you're going to be in. That's what we're talking about, what modes your camera is in. We'll talk about the light, the major role in how your picture is viewed, and metering modes. Metering modes is very important when it comes to various types of light and what your camera is trying to use as the metering for the light. If you have it in automatic aperture or automatic shutter speed, or even if you have it in program mode, the metering mode, and we'll cover this, is very important. If you try to use the whole, just quickly, try to use the whole frame as your metering, it's going to take the best light from all different spots and sort of average them together. If you use the spot where it's smaller than your frame, it's going to take just the light from that area. And if you're focusing on like a dark car on a bright day, it will use the light that's coming off the car and use that as your light, so it'll focus and adjust more itself to that lighting and not let the rest of the lighting throw it off. And if you want to be really specific, at nighttime, when I was doing night shots, and I'll show you some of those later, I was using center focusing. It was a little dot in the whole group, one dot to measure all the light. And some of my night light shots, I'll show you how that came out. And it just comes out to be one of those things from experimentation and trying out. What I did it for, because I had the light from the car behind it coming in to this car. I focused on this car, and this light, actually, it picked up enough light and used that to expose the whole car, and it really came out nice. We'll talk about depth of view. That's the f-stop. It's how much of the picture is in the focal, at the focal plane. And the focal plane is the part where your sensor is. You've got your lens out here, and the focal plane is how you're focusing. It's just like your eye. Your eye cornea, or your retina, back part of your lens of your eye, not the lens, is focusing on a specific spot on your eye so that things come in focus. And as you change your position, your eye adjusts your lens so that it comes to focus at that one spot. And that's how things are in focus with our eyes. same way as a camera. We'll talk about that focal plane is actually where on your camera, I don't know if you can see this, but there'll be a line for a lot of places like mine right here. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a line. That's where the actual focal plane is. And for professional photographers, they'll actually use a tape measure to say how far away they are from that line to the portrait's nose, because they focus on the nose. The rest of the ear is going to be in focus, and they don't want anything behind them to be in focus. And that's what they'll do. They'll measure right to the person's nose when in portrait mode. Shooting cars, we don't have to be quite that accurate. But it's still nice to know where your focal plane is and what somebody's talking about. We'll talk about the shutter speed. I think you can get an idea of that as how fast your shutter closes and opens to let the amount of light in so that your sensor picks up light. And that's how you pick up different colors of light. If we do it too fast and for one particular type of lighting, it's going to be dark. If you open up too much, it's going to be overexposed. And those are things that people will talk about as overexposure and underexposure. And I think you can get the general idea of what those two definitions of the words are. Now, ISO, that goes back to film. It's really just a relative function in today's cameras. Back in the day, I would only shoot in daylight 100 speed ISO. Evening, mornings, maybe 200. If it was really something I needed a fast speed on, I might push it to 400. I shot 800 one time, and there was so much noise in it, I couldn't even hardly use the pictures, but I was able to get some evening type shots that I wouldn't have been able to get with other types of film. And what the ISO really stands is how sensitive your sensor or the film was to a fixed amount of light. So 100 was used for bright days because it would take more saturation, more light to get in and saturate the silver crystals that were on the film. Today, it's all relative, but you can still use the baseline of 100 ISO. 200 for outdoor use is just fine. Lower is fine too, but a lot of cameras don't even use 50. My cameras use 50, and I can set 1 to 25, so that's a really, if I have it on a tripod, I can really get good color saturation because it takes longer for the light to come in there. Today's cameras, even this camera, will shoot up to about 800 to 1,000. This camera, I've shot up to 32,000. And on my 7D, which is a lot new sensor, I've shot 64,000 in the afternoon. And it's utterly amazing the amount of the lack of noise that you can get still out of that picture. So play again with the ISOs. We'll talk about it, but it's just a relative function. So 100 is half of 200, so it's half as sensitive. 200 is going to be twice as sensitive, and so forth. So it's a function of doubling. So 100, 200, 400, 800, 1600, 3200 on is what you can relate those to. So when you see what those things are and you're overexposing it, going down one ISO step is almost like going down one f-stop. So they're sort of related, and we'll talk to you about that also. And we'll go through those slides here. Light modes, we'll talk about. This is what they call the Kelvin temperature of light. Our eyes see from about right here all the way down into this area. Green will still look like green to us. Reds will be red. But on your sensor, your camera sensor, your reds won't be red and green won't be green and so forth. Blues will not come out the same. And this is what we're talking about on auto white balance. White balance on our camera that we put in on auto just takes the best lighting that it can. It's usually from about 6,000 down to about 4,000 is for daylight pictures. Below here, you're starting to talk about fluorescent lighting, incandescent lighting. Up here, you get into other types of lighting and things that are just, they'll throw the colors off for the sensor. The sensor is fixed to its adjustment. Our eyes see and brain interprets what we call green, no matter what the white balance is, we still see green as green and so forth. I don't know if many of you have ever taken a picture in daylight mode and then go indoors and take a picture with your incandescent lighting or fluorescent lighting and the tint is off. That's because it's balanced for a specific around 5,000 Kelvin temperature to down to around 3,000. And the way you can change that in software, and we can talk about that later on, is you go in there and just change the white balance. It's really easy to do, and it's a way to recapture your pictures versus just throwing away because the color tinting is off. In film, I've done that many times. Shot daylight film and fluorescent lighting, and just told the developers, hey, I shot this under fluorescent lighting. The white balance needs to be fluorescent lighting, and the colors came out just fine. And a lot of those will relate to morning, which is a blue, cool. It's a cooler color. The evenings are usually red, so the red comes through. This is just the way the light bends through the air. In the morning, you can change that tint by warming it up, by moving it from down in here into this temperature range. You can actually bring it up, and it will make the reds come out a little better. We got tungsten lighting, fluorescent lighting. These are off-ball and oddball type of things that you have. And then we have flash. And flash tries to imitate the 5600 daylight Kelvin temperature of lighting so that you get your natural balance of colors. Yeah. All right. So we'll talk about shooting modes once we get to the other pictures here. Aperture priority is where the photographer sets the aperture, hence the depth of field. And that depth of field will show in the slides here. And once I get into the bottom part of the slide, I'll pull up this one part of the screen where we can show this thing. And you guys got a link to that slide. It's really neat to use. It sets the depth of field. So as a photographer, you may want to show a shallow depth of field so much before your focus point, and so much is going to be after. And it expands more after than it does forward from your item. So if you got f1.4, it's going to be a very narrow depth of field compared to your center point. And the wider you go, it's going to do this. As you can see, this finger moved a little bit, but this went back a lot further. So your focus point is going further back from where your focus point is. And at the racetrack, that was really good. So if I had a F6, F8, f-stop, and I focused on the front of the car, usually the back of the car was still going to be in focus, where if I shot at f2.8 or f1.8, I might get the front of the car in focus and the driver might be in focus, but the back of the car would be out of focus. And what happens if I wanted to use that as an example? That's great, because the cars behind it would be out of focus. But what happens if I wanted to show a whole line of cars in a string? And we'll show some of those examples. I want to have a smaller f-stop, like an f11, that shows the front of the car and all the way back to the other cars behind it, that they were all in focus. So there's different reasons for using different f-stops. In that particular mode, you set the f-stop, you'll set the ISO, and the camera automatically does the shutter speed. And usually inside the camera, there's a little warning that if you're under lighted, it may not click at all. You may not be able to focus if you have your camera in autofocus mode. And if you do snap it, it's going to come out dark. So it adjusts the shutter speed, which is very important. But it's one of these things where semi-automatic. We're setting our depth of field based upon what we want to keep in focus, and let the camera set the shutter speed. Shutter priority is just the opposite, as you can see. We set the shutter speed. Like say if I'm at a racetrack and I know I want the wheels to spin, but I don't want to get too much blur, I'll set it at a specific f-stop that I've learned, a shutter speed that I've learned, where I get the car in focus, the wheels are moving slightly, which is very nice to do. And any faster, the wheels stop moving. You still get the same car in focus, but this camera will set the shutter, the depth of field. And like I said, I shoot manual mode because I know what I want to get. But it's one of those things, if you want to set your shutter speed slow and you want to show movement and you're panning your camera with it, you'll still show the background in a blur, but the car will be in focus. That's one of the reasons why you may want to do that. Manual mode is just exactly what it is. you're setting your f-stop, your shutter speed, your ISO, all based upon what you want the picture to look like. With digital cameras, we can once again throw those away. We can experiment. Nighttime photography is a good way to experiment with, to get your thing set up. You just take a couple shots and you make your adjustments accordingly, so that the stars or the night or the sunset comes in the way you want it. Program mode, that's the mode that I'm going to try to get you away from. That's where the camera does everything and you just point and poke. And if you've got a $500 or $1,000 camera and lens set up and you're just pointing and poking, that's what I call them, point and pokes. You just take a picture. You might as well just go back to your lower end prosumer or your iPhone Droid type of phone that you just want to get a picture. So anyways, auto mode, once again, it's something like program mode. Program mode on most cameras, you can set the ISO, you can set the focus point. When auto mode, you take everything out of the photographer's hands and it just goes, and photographers can't make a mistake about something that's focusing, but their pictures may not be what they wanted to represent. So anyways, it's nice to set up to understand your camera in auto, move to program, solely move to aperture and shutter speed priority, and once you get into manual mode, you'll be treating it just like it's for some of us that have to work on our cars. It's a 1/2 inch socket or it's a 12 millimeter, and we do know the difference, but for 12 millimeter and 1/2 inch, they're almost the same thing. But anyways, it's just another way to use your tool. Gary, any questions as we're starting to go into some of the displays?
Yes, we have a couple of questions from back when you were doing the sensor size slides.
Okay.
The first one from Gary Semeluk was, is this evident when you're buying the camera?
Yes, it is. They'll tell you in the specs. If there's somebody that there's trying to sell you something, if you're not at a professional Photoshop, they will not know what the difference is. You can compare them online and you can see the specs. They'll tell you that these cameras are not full frame. And in the specs, they'll tell you the photo sensor size. So this will give you an idea. If you go to buy a camera, you can use this display, go back and say, oh, that is different from this one. And if they're at the same price, why would you not buy the one with the bigger sensor? This is not that much difference, but from here to here, there's a difference. But you can see they call these, oh, can't remember the word right now, but they're not full frame. This is the standard Canon and Nikon sensors. Compared to the full frame, you're going to pay a little bit more money because you've got a more expensive sensor. But look at the specs of the camera itself from the manufacturer's data sheet. You may not see that on Amazon or eBay if you're buying it, but go look back to the manufacturer. Nikon and Canon both have their cameras all the way back to the 1980s, their specs that are still online. Hopefully that answers that question. Any more?
Okay, another one on this topic, Diana asks, is a digital 35 millimeter sensor 1-to-1?
Yes, we'll call that 1-to-1. It's not truly 1-to-1 because 35 millimeter, this is the 35 millimeter aspect of it. This is 22. As you can see, it's a little bit of a rectangle. Medium format, as you can see, is really a 1-to-1. Now, if this one costs a $1,000 camera for this, you can imagine the price of having to pay for that much more sensor, but look what you're getting. So there's a big difference in the price. A full frame is going to give you more color saturations. It's going to cost you a little bit more. And some lenses and cameras you can't use. You have to buy, you're forced to buy a lens that is for full frame only. You can't put what they call reduced sensor size, the APC lenses, on a full frame camera. And what happens is the back of the lens in the camera is meant to be at a certain point from the sensor. The APC or the smaller sensor size on a full frame lens will actually touch the sensor and can ruin your camera. So if you're going to buy a full frame camera, Be aware of also what the prices of your lenses are going to be, because you can't really buy the lower priced lenses, which are meant for the lower priced camera. So that's a good question, Diane.
Okay, and Joe Martin has a question. I think it's on the next slide. What is the relationship with ISO in the digital camera? What's the effect of 100 or 1600 to the digital effect?
Okay, so 100, once again, I said it was a relationship. So 100, let's just say that's our baseline. 200 is going to be twice as fast as 100. And I think that relates to 1600 being 32 times, maybe. Let's see, 2, 4, 8. It'll be 4 times faster than 100. So the ISO is just one of those things that can be used, and what it allows you to do, if you got so much a low light, it allows you to use shutter speed to actually get enough light in there, but not to be so slow. If you try to use it at 100, your shutter speed, let's say, would be at maybe 1/40th of a second, and trying to hold a camera 1/40th of a second and not have blur is very hard. If you set it to 1600, you might get your shutter speed up to 1/200th of a second, and that will allow you to take a lower light picture and not have your handshake or movement affect your focus. So it's used, the higher ISO is used in lower light, is a relationship. Does that answer the question?
Well, Joe provides 2 little follow-ups to that. Says, what changes processing speed versus recording speed, and why not shoot everything at 1600?
So when you change your ISO, it's going to affect, and I'll get to that in a minute, it's going to change your shutter speed, and it's going to change your f-stop, because you're trying to hit the sweet spot of light hitting your sensor. So as you change your shutter speed to 1/1600 or your ISO, it's going to drive the gain of your sensor up, also inducing more noise. In low light, we're going to start picking up noise in the camera, and we'll see that effect, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But it also allows you to go to a faster shutter speed. If you got cars, just say an example, you're lucky enough to get into an area where the cars are coming at you at 200 miles an hour, like an Indy car, or the Petit Le Mans. You using a little bit faster shutter speed allows you to use a faster ISO. We call them ISO. The higher the number is faster. It allows you to use a faster shutter speed, so you capture the car. I think the rule of thumb is at 60 miles an hour, your car is moving 88 feet per second, and it doubles at 120. So can you imagine that car is moving 170 feet per second? And if you want to stop it, you have to have fast enough shutter speed to catch it, just like a hummingbird. I'll give you an example of a hummingbird. You have to shoot at 1/1000th of a second or faster to get the wings to stop. 1,000, the wings are a slight blur. At 2/1000ths of a second, the hummingbird's wings are still. A faster ISO will allow your camera to use a faster shutter speed, but you're going to get more noise. So it's a balancing act of these three. And I've got a slide down there later on that will show some of that. Does that cover that?
It looks like it, and that's all the questions in the chat window right now.
Okay. So here we'll talk about our f-stop and how our f-stop relates to our depth of focus. You can see here we got a bigger, very high f-stop, and what it is that diaphragm in your lens is getting smaller and smaller from f1.4 all the way back to here. As we go back, you can see the mountains are out of focus. Like I said, the depth of field, and I've got a slide that we'll go to near the end that we can pull this up. And if anybody wants to look at it, it's this one right here. You go to Google Sites. No, I'm sorry, not that one. This one, this depth of field. If you want to open that up, if you have another window you want to look at, this is a very nice slide to look at, and we'll cover that here in just a little bit. It's very nice to, oh, I'm sorry, it's this one right here. I had to look at this. This is a big explanation of how depth of field work. involved in physics and everything. It's a Stanford University graduate level type thing. But if you go to this depth of simulator here, you can play with this. We'll go back to, you can go back to the same, where we're at right here. Depth of field in the background is out of focus. We haven't changed anything on our lens, but as you can see, we keep changing our f-stop, which we're allowing less light to come in, but our depth of field is getting better and better to where finally the background is in focus. But we've got such little light, we have to make an adjustment to either change our ISO or our f-stop, our shutter speed, to let more light in. The faster the shutter speed, the less light comes in. The slower the shutter speed, obviously more light comes in, just like we're seeing down here. So if you set your ISO at 50, these are equivalents where they're going to start being, you got nice focus, 1/1000th of a second, everything's in focus. 500ths of a second, everything's still in focus. The ISO went up a little bit, so it's doubled in its amount of, it's actually slower the amount of speed that the film develops, or the sensor can adjust to the light, 1/500th of a second. Here, you start seeing a little bit of noise coming into the picture. We've gone to 1/16th of a shutter speed. We're letting less light in, but we're trying to adjust with it with our ISO. But you'll start seeing noise come in here. Even though it's still in focus, there's more noise here. As you'll notice over here, there's very little noise. Once you start playing with some of these things, you'll start seeing that noise effect in your camera. And today's software, it can actually, a lot of it be removed. A lot of the noise can be removed from this area about right in here. We start getting up in here, we've actually lost the difference between our subject and any noise that may come in here. So as you see, we can start going down here. We got someone, as an example, someone's running. At a certain point, we're getting a little bit out of focus. See how we got nice perception? The body size is really the same. Same here. Look at this. We've lost our focus at about 1/60th of a second. A typical picture of people gathering is about 1/25th of a second. If you set your camera to 1/25th of a second and put it on shutter speed priority and put your ISO somewhere around 200 to 400, you'll probably get a nice picture that is focused. Everybody stop. You'll still catch somebody with their eye blinking because it's faster than your eye can blink. So you might catch it halfway. That's why you see some pictures, looks like they got a lazy eye, but they caught them somewhere in the middle of them snapping, closing their eye. Over here, these are really good shots for using at the racetrack. And I don't use this ISO, but I'll put my ISO down here, use a different f-stop to let more light in, but I'll pan with the car and I'll get the background out of focus. As you notice, I'll get the background blurring, but I've got my subject in focus. So as you notice, the slower the shutter speed, as you can imagine, put your camera on 1/2 of a second and take a picture, and you can actually tell that it takes time for that to move, and you trying to hold that perfectly still, you'll see what happens. Put it up to 1/8th of a second and 1/30th of a second. You'll find where you can actually hold your camera, if you're really good at it, about 1/80th of a second. If you're bracing yourself, you can go down to 1/60 to 1/30th of a second sometime. If you're on a wall, say you're leaning up against the wall and your elbows are well braced, you can go down to 1/30th to 1/10th of a second and get pictures of like snow falling. And you'll actually see the snow falling through your picture. Or a river water movement is good at about 1/30th of a second. You actually, instead of seeing the river just still freeze, it actually is very fluid looking, like it sort of blends in, and it just gets a very nice easy picture, or easy visual picture of the lake. The water is actually moving on a waterfall or something. Other modes that we've got here, you've got inside your camera, inside the actual visual part of your camera, you'll be able to see when you hold the camera button halfway down, it will tell you if you're under or overexposed, and it may give you more information like the specific number of f-stops that you're below what you need to do. There's various ways on your camera to adjust that while you're actually taking the picture. To ensure you're got the correct appearance of light or dark picture. So if you use your camera, you push it halfway down as you're holding it, it gives you an idea what your exposure is and whether you're going to have the right picture that you want to come out. Sometimes I'll be shooting a picture and then I'll accidentally bump the shutter speed down really low, and I'm wondering why my picture didn't come out. And I'll look through my eyepiece as I'm shooting, and I'll see that, and I can adjust it by either this button or my button in the back. Real easily, I can adjust those two ideas there. If you do set something one way or another, don't forget to reset it to 0 when you're done. If you set something up a specific way just for that one shot, you may have to go back versus walking around 2 days later and all of a sudden you start taking a few pictures and you're wondering why your pictures aren't coming out because you had them set for that specific shot that you were taking. Exposure lock. There's a way that you can actually, on cameras, on my camera, it's back here. When I push this one button to exposure lock, I can actually focus on something that I want and then pan away or pan that focus away to where, like someone's face, I'm shooting right to the face, but I want the picture to be off the set a little bit. I keep it pressed down, it stays focus locked, and then I can push the button so I can reframe my picture. That's very good if you want to take a picture of somebody with a statue or some landscape behind you or a palace or a building. You focus on them so they stay in focus. You halfway put your button down, you move the camera off just a little bit, push it the rest of the way, and it stays focused on the subject that you wanted to have focused. So that's what they talk about, pushing the button halfway down. A good thing of practice is when you take your pictures, don't try to snap it one way. If you're in manual mode, that works great. But if you've got it in any of the automatic modes, it takes time for your camera to actually adjust to what it is in automatic mode before it takes the picture. So if you plan your picture, halfway push it down and get it where you got a green light or a green square inside your iframe, you push it the rest of the way, you're locked into your picture. Exposure bracketing. This is a really nice feature, especially if you're using sunset pictures, landscape pictures, you're taking pictures of a car and a specific still photos. You're not moving around at all. You get a picture that is darker, your normal picture, and lighter, and they put those three pictures together. It's almost like what they call HDR on the iPhones that I talked about earlier. And they blend those things together so that it comes out with a really good, nice balance of pictures. Today's home photographers that are for realtor and realty pictures, that's what the photographers are doing. They're not using flash anymore. They're going inside and they're taking a wide angle shot. And because there's shadows in various different parts of the house, they'll take a picture, 3 or 4 pictures at different f-stops and that's a different f-stop, shutter speed, so that they get more light in and everything's in focus the same way. And that way they get one picture out of like 4 pictures and it gets a very natural looking picture of your house. Very nice, and a new technique that realtors, photographers have started to use. Any other questions? I'll give another pause here.
No, Gary just stepped away briefly, but I think we're good. So you can continue.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Diana. Metering mode. This is a very important part, and I think I've got it down here. Your metering mode, I'm just going to give this as an example. I'll go back to the sheet. If it's metering on the center, or it's metering like in this group, or it's metering over the whole sensor, will give you different light adjustments for your camera to adjust the f-stop or the shutter speed if you have it in some sort of automatic mode. Center weighted averaging is just that. If you can imagine it taking the sensor and it's taking the center weighting as it's weighted more in the center than it is on the edges. So if you had a bright spot out here, it's not going to change your focus over here to what it's trying to adjust the light in the proper camera settings to take a picture. If you used the whole frame, which is just like what they call evaluative, they'll look at all these sensors here and come up with the best guess of what your light is supposed to be based upon millions and millions of pictures. But it takes time to do that. At a racetrack, you don't have time for your camera to start evaluating things while the car is in a specific spot. Then there's another one that has center focus spot, what they call spot metering. And that is just that one little spot. And that is really very good for someone on portraits. That's very good for a specific spot on a car, or like say in a tree. If a bird is in a shaded area and you want to use the light that is actually on the bird, you use that spot focus, it will have the light of that bird as the whole amount of light to measure from and adjust the camera accordingly. So those are three different modes. You got full frame, you got center weighted averaging, and then you'll have a spot mode. As you can understand, this is going to be more accurate for that specific type of a shot. As I pointed out, it's 3% of the area for the Canon. So you can understand, instead of using most of the frame or the center weighted, the spot is only 3.5% of the whole frame that it uses for lighting only. So the darker it is, it will make adjustments accordingly. Evaluative, I don't use evaluative because it slows what I want to take a shot down. It slows me down because the computer has to learn from its information on what to actually adjust. But for some things, it's worth playing with and understanding of it. It takes a picture of the whole, takes a weighting of light from the whole sensor and adjusts things according to what Canon or Nikon puts into their camera. Says if you have this specific number, it comes out whatever algorithm they use, then other settings can be changed and you'll probably have a decent picture. And it also depends on brightness and color of each zone in that square of the sensor. So this is slower, this is going to be faster. As you can imagine, it's only taking a small area to evaluate and use as its formula for telling with the camera what to do. The local contrast, spatial arrangement of the zones, and the focal distance are based upon what your camera is measuring for light, because it will change your focus point. If it has to change the f-stop, if you're in shutter speed priority, it will change the f-stop, which will change your focus distance because it may focus on light or something further in the background that you may not want to do. These things are used for the center weighted averaging. Even evaluative, where you're not so worried about something moving, is good for portrait or landscape mode. That will allow you to put it on a tripod or hold it a little bit longer, and it's going to do a best evaluation on that whole picture. It helps you in learning what's going on. Eventually, you'll start using the center weighted averaging and the spot, depending on what you're trying to shoot. If you were shooting out at a concourse, I would usually probably use my center weighted averaging. Like I've taken a picture of the front grille and so forth. I would probably use the center weighted averagings to make sure that the parts of the grille that were a little bit darker because of the sunlight or whatever, it would use that as the average weighting versus maybe any reflections out on the sides might throw my metering off. I would want to not use that as the weighted for my picture to be overexposed is what probably would happen. Face detection is another thing, excuse me. When you use face detection, it's trying to use a specific spot in the focus area. Where were we? It's trying to find something in here that they call meets a certain tonal quality for face detection. And that's really nice if you put your camera over to on a bench or on a tripod and you push it, and there's modes for that to do facial detection. It won't take a picture until you get into that one area and you put your face in there. It focuses on your face and will take a picture for you. It's also good for things that you're moving and people are moving around and you haven't quite got anything, but if you put it in facial detection mode, as soon as it sees and you got your camera halfway pushed down, it focuses on a face, it'll start taking the picture right at that particular point. It's another thing to sort of play with. You have to sort of get an idea of what it's doing, but it won't take a picture until that face is in focus. Very good for your phones. That's what they do for facial pictures. When you're taking a picture, it'll make sure the faces are in focus. And a lot of your cameras have a mode to actually do that. It's a little bit deeper into the camera operation, and I really don't want to go into that. It's more specific too. We've been talking about things that make a difference. We've been talking about the ISO and the detail. We've seen that we went to higher ISO, we had more noise. We get more light, we got shallower. If we need more light, we got shallower depth of field to get more light to get the same picture. That means the focus is going to be very shallow on our focus item. Down here, you see we got less light. 1/1000th of a second is letting less light in, but it's good for freezing the action. In the same way over here, we need more light, 1 second. We get artistic blurs, and there's times that we may want to use that artistic blur. Like I only shoot about maybe 1/80th of a second when a car at a racetrack, but I get more blur, and that's that artistic blur that I was talking about. But here's the 3 things that affect your picture: your shutter speed and light, the aperture, how much light is getting to our sensor, and what our sensor ISO is set at. It was really like the gain of an amplifier. The more ISO that goes up, it's more sensitive, and we get more noise. Down here, we're going to get less noise, and we're going to get more color. Actually, it's the other way around the way this chart is. We get more color and detail up here, and the higher the ISO, we get less detail, and you start seeing it's not out of focus, it's just noise from the sensor. Any questions about that? This is pretty important to understand what your camera is doing and balancing things out. If you get overexposure, you can change your aperture, your shutter speed, or your ISO. But changing these also affects the other 2, as you will notice. So you're trying to get to a sweet spot where all of them are equal. As we see in our triangle here, we're trying to get this sweet spot where all of them blend together to give us the picture that we're trying to shoot for. Any questions there?
No questions in chat, Al.
We're good?
Yep, so far looks good.
Okay. So back again, just a real quick, and you've got this in your handout to go back to, that it's hard to remember everything that I'm saying. So we've got our function, shutter speed, up and down. It affects the light, secondary effect, motion blur, and so forth. So this is a good chart for you to go back to. The higher the ISO, it's more sensitive, but you get more noise. So there's the things as a review real quick of what I've been talking about. And as we start talking about the actual pictures, you'll start seeing, as you review them, why did I have so much blur? Might not have had one of these things set right. I didn't get my depth of field quite set right. I was taking a picture of the rose petal, and I got the back part of the petal in focus, but the center part, what do they call it? The pedestal, I think it is. It was out of focus because you didn't focus on the pedestal to get the background thing in focus also. that was one of my arguments for getting a better dive camera. I kept on taking pictures of these small shrimp, and I'd get the pictures in focus, but you couldn't tell what the heck the animal was behind it. It was just one of those things. So I use that as an argument for a better camera, and it worked, obviously. Capturing that moment, this is what we're taking pictures for. It's more than just pushing the button. There's some people that don't really catch what they're trying to get in the viewfinder, which we can't use with this. And we use our viewfinder to sort of frame our picture, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to avoid blur, low light, or incorrect light. The incorrect light is the white balance, is that I'm referring to. A focus, we're trying to make sure what our focus and our item that we're trying to get the picture of is in focus, and what happens if we're not in focus. The camera could have picked up something else and focused on it. So why did it do that? That's what we're trying to give our cameras the option, and knowing what we're doing, that we won't get something out of focus. Light, we've talked about how the light spectrum and how it affects the camera sensor. The same lighting, even though we call it fluorescent, is really a really bad light for cameras. But if you set it properly to the white balance, you'll come out with your proper greens and your other colors. So the lighting, as we see from the Kelvin temperature range, you can go back up that slide and understand how that affects the camera sensor. And in your camera, we have different modes for different types of lighting, which is really great because we don't always set our picture taker to the right mode. Usually it's set in auto, but it gives you the option to, if you want to change the tint to something else, like an old picture. It'll even use sepia as a little filter in there. Or you can say it needs to be warmer or cooler in there. It allows you to change the white balance to give us a better picture that we want. Flash, when to use. A lot of times people will say, why are you using a flash during daylight? I gave you a quick example of that. And sometimes you can't get the party to take, say, taking a picture of some people. I shot a high school graduation a couple weeks ago, and it was in broad daylight, but we used a flash for the fill because the sun was behind us. Unfortunately, we couldn't change the way the stage was, but the flash filled in where we had shadows on the faces, and everybody had the right color tone. We had the right blend of their face, not having shadows on their face, and hopefully we got a lot of their high school graduation pictures for them. They were one school that was able to do that, so it's a lot of fun using even the flash during daylight. It's a good helping device. We've got things on our camera called one-shot, continuous, or facial detection. We're getting down into the features in the menu box of your camera, and each one has a little bit of a different effect on what you're doing. What it affects mostly is your battery. Wherever you're at, you have a limited amount of battery to shoot. And if you're shooting a wedding, you better either have some more batteries that can be swapped out very fast, or have a battery pack that will probably shoot 4,000 or 5,000 shots before your flash will run down. The one shot is what I use, and that's what most photographers use, because that's when you can push your button on your camera halfway down and it focuses and you take your shot. It requires less battery. It requires you to focus, and sometimes it requires you to sort of prepare. There's times where I'll focus on a specific spot in low light so that my camera already adjusts to it, and wait for the car to come around, and I'll move the camera over to where the car is, and right where the car comes into that spot, I'll finish taking the picture, and that's how I can get a focus at nighttime, because my camera's already focused to where it is. I just bring the item back into that, and it doesn't spend time trying to evaluate the light. So one shot is usually what you're going to use for most of the time. Continuous auto servos uses a lot of battery, but if you're doing video, this is the mode that you want to be in, because as things move around in your focus, it's going to continually to focus. An example is at the racetrack. You got a car coming to you and about to go in a curve, and this would constantly follow the focus of the device once it became in focus. Like I said, it's great for moving subjects. The other thing is if someone is, you're sort of following it with your camera, but you haven't got it quite in focus, or you're not quite sure you can take the picture, but all of a sudden something happens, you snap right away, it's already in focus. It doesn't have the lag, and that's what we were looking for. I caught a picture out at Road Atlanta where Porsche got punted by them. That's what we call it at the racetrack. They basically ran them off the track. A BMW punted the Porsche, and they were coming towards the rocks, and I knew exactly where I wanted to be focused at. So I just focused at the rocks and started snapping away, and I got a picture of the Porsche hitting the rocks in a wall of rocks coming up. But it's just one of those things to be prepared, but it helps you in those movements of video and constant movement. It doesn't take as much time for your camera to focus when it's in there. Facial detection, I've covered that already. Is there any questions about facial detection? Because it's a pretty good thing that a lot of people may use. Any questions about how these things and what I've just covered? Like I said, I want to take breaks between different subject items.
Al, we have a question from the previous slide, sort of. It's from Derek Brown, and he asks that he uses a Canon 80D to shoot stills, and he says, at the track, do you use the viewfinder or the live window?
I do not use the live window for two reasons. It's a delay between what your sensor and what your picture is going to take, and you can't quite frame the photos that you want. A lot of times I'm using a telephoto, and that trying to use the rear live view, you just can't quite do it. Also, when you're got your camera up here, you've got it very well braced. If you're out here doing this and trying to hold this still, no matter how good you are, you're still jiggling it. Up here, you've got your head is braced. It helps you brace the camera from moving. And as you move, it moves with you. So it's almost like a camera on a car. It continues to move, but the car, if it was focused on the inside of the car doesn't move because it's moving with the car. If you can sort of picture that. I always shoot through my viewfinder. Now there are times where I'll just shoot out in the crowd, and I'll just walk around and I'll just do these, or I'll lift my camera up and, like at the start of the Petit Le Mans where everybody is gathering, I'll just take pictures where it's above everybody's head just to show the depth of field of everybody that's out in the crowd. And not just the car. I'll do one of those where there's so many people in front of me, I'll just lift my camera up and shoot the car and maybe the mechanics or the drivers that are associated with that car. So I don't use live view. I think it uses up too much battery. And I don't know if that answers the question, but that's my specific part on the live view. But it's nice, it's useful. I mean, it's a handy thing to do if you're just shooting like this and you're wanting to get an idea of something. Or if you're doing video, that's just as well because you're not worried about the timing. So if you're shooting from the live screen, you're doing this, you can actually see what you're shooting. So there's features on it that are fairly nice too. So I got a preference for racetrack, so I use the iView.
Yeah, Derek says
Yeah,
thanks.
Derek?
I think we answered the question.
Okay. So what is this all getting to that I've talked about and I've hinted on several different things is being prepared for your picture, for your unique moment, even with your phone, even with, these things, you want to be ready for that particular moment. I remember I took a picture of my daughter and I knew it was about to happen. As we've all seen kids eating food and they start falling asleep. Next thing you know, their head's rocking, and I got a picture of my daughter's head doing this, part of the way down, and then all the way down onto the table. I took 4 shots very quick with film but it was something that was just unique. I was seeing it happening. I said, I got to get a picture of this, because when I was blinking, when I would open and so on. But those unique moments, it's nice to know because we can do it with these now, not have to have our film camera out. One thing that you have to be aware of is the light source, the direction. The best point is to have the light behind you, but a lot of times we can't have the light behind us. And that's why I brought up using the flash sometimes for those photo shots where the sun is off to the right, or it's even behind us. And having the flash does that fill for the facial color rendition. What is the light source? I've covered that. We've covered the color spectrum, which is in Kelvin. It's measured in a Kelvin temperature. And I guess the guy that did it was named Kelvin, so they named it after him. Whether it's daylight, shade, it'll have a different temperature, fluorescent lighting, and tungsten lighting. If you're taking a picture in your house, or if you look at your tungsten lighting or your iridescent, the light that we've been used to for many years before they outlawed them was an orange type of light in our eyes. Well, that sensor threw all that lighting through the sensor color all off on indoors. But if you set it to tungsten, then your pictures would come out with the proper white balance and colors would look natural. Taking pictures at Christmas time, we always had those tungsten lights on from our Christmas trees, and you wonder why the color don't come out quite right. It's because we might not have had the white balance set right. How long will your camera take to power up is a big thing. Professional model cameras will take about 1 second to 1.5 seconds to power up where you're ready to shoot. My older camera that one of my first digital SLRs, I think it took about 3 seconds to fire up. This one takes about 4 to 5 seconds for it to power on and where it's ready. Well, I guess it's maybe not 4 or 5 seconds, but you can see it still takes a little bit of time for it to come on. Try to visualize the moment before it happens. Shooting concours, cars don't really move on us, but shooting people that are talking together around the concours, talking about their car, and as you're talking, you can tell that they're really enjoying it, trying to catch someone's face and smile and catch that joke. That's trying to visualize the moment before it happens. You know these people are going to do it. Taking candid shots, not of them looking directly at the camera. Taking candid shots is really nice because they're acting naturally. That's a good thing to do, is try to take those candid shots. And if you do shoot a wedding or you happen to shoot a group photo, tell everybody, don't look at me when I'm taking pictures. Just keep on talking and we'll take good pictures of you. Let them just continue enjoying the moment, and you're visualizing the moment and capturing that moment again, and everybody will have that unique moment that you took the picture of. The next thing they're gonna know is, how did you get that picture? What were you doing? What were you thinking? You're prepared for it. You were waiting for the light. You knew what was going on, and you've got your camera ready and set, and that's gonna improve your pictures. And that's what we're trying to do today. I'm gonna go to this part. Now we're starting to get into your particular part of the camera. You'll see this on one of the screens where you can actually, on my camera, see if I can get this. I don't know if you can see that, but on the back of my camera, I can select what one of these dots I want to use as my focus point. Say I'm taking pictures of a race car and they're coming by so fast, but I want to make sure that the front of the car, which would be to the right of me more than likely, or if it was going left to me, like NASCAR, I would maybe do it over here. I'd use my focus point over here, or possibly even over here, so that the rest of the picture was in focus. I was using this as my major point. What happens if I'm using a portrait picture and the people are standing to the left or to the right, and I want to focus on them without having to move around and do the pre-focus thing I was telling you about? You could have them focus right here. It would focus on your subject, and the rest of it wouldn't pay attention to what you're focusing on. So if you had it in autofocus and you had it on this little spot here, it would actually focus that area only, which could be your subjects, your friends, or the statue, just as an example, and would not try to focus on things back here. This is a more advanced camera. This is my other camera. I can select multiples. This has got 63 dots. I can select a single dot anywhere in here. I can select a group. I can select a larger group. I can select a smaller group. I can select a square of like about 4 of these together and move those 4 anywhere, or I can just use my center focus. That's a lot of variables to play with, but when you're doing certain things that are moving and you know your focus is possibly going to be to the right or left of you, portrait picture, you want people here in your background, you don't really care about being in focus, you may want to set these things. It's really handy to do. In modern days, today's brand new digital SLRs, they've got these things called crosshairs, vertical and horizontals. As you can see, the crosshair type is a mixture of the horizontal and vertical. What that's doing is looking for a contrast difference in something like this, that the crosshairs are going to be more sensitive to focus than something that's just going this way or that way, that's looking for a difference of something that's out of focus. So that's why your center focus is one of your best things to do if you don't have crosshair types all over your sensor type. My camera has crosshairs probably for about most of this area here. And also depends on what lens f-stop you're using. But this is one thing that if you take your pictures are all on centered, like at a racetrack, I'm trying to get the center part as they're coming towards me. I want it to focus on the front of the car. I want the car to be the focus point. I would use my center focusing. Once again, portraits, people that are in groups, landscape photos, flowers. You may want to take a picture of the flower on the side and you want the background, but you don't want it to focus over here. You would use some of these. And that's all set up in your camera focus points individually. And I'm not going to go into that, but you can understand each camera is going to be a little bit different. Any questions on this one? Because this is a pretty good point on helping you focus on your subject and also focus off to the sides where you want your focus at. And how do you do that? You're trying to focus over here with, and you want your framing to get all this, but not have to focus over here with your center point. Any questions, Gary?
There are 2 questions. One is a follow-up from Derek Brown. He says, I'm glad to see you're a Canon guy. Which speedlight flash do you use? There are quite a few.
Well, I'll tell you the reason I went to Canon. It feels good in my hands. That's how I bought my first camera. There's no preference to Nikon or Canon, but I also had my previous dive camera and a lot of Canon printers, and I tried to, I'll just be point blank, I tried to BS Canon that my camera got wet in the ocean from the case had cracked. I didn't know this. And they told me, no, this has been in salt water. Your camera has been damaged and we're not going to replace it. And then I told them I had the Canon dive camera and the case. And they said, well, why didn't you tell us that in the first place? Well, being an electronics engineer, I know you don't take electronics in the water, case or not. So if I had just told them the truth, but anyways, it makes a good story. I sent the case and the camera and they found a microfracture in the buttons that go through the case that were pushing the buttons down. And they gave me this camera, a brand new camera and a new dive case for nothing. And it was well out of warranty, but the camera and the case together were a lifetime warranty. So there's another reason for selecting Canon. Would Nikon have done it? I think so. I think Nikon would have done the same thing.
He was asking about which speedlight flash do you use?
Oh, yeah. Well, he asked me why my preference. I got off tangent. Sorry. We were supposed to stay on focus. I use a 580 2X, which is the second model, which is very nice because it for anything below 105 millimeter lenses, it auto focuses and auto adjust the flash distancing based on your lens that you're using. It's also can be used for controlling other flashes. So you can have multiple flashes. You can have one on your camera and multiples off to the side, and it will control those so that you get multiple areas. I found it online for about $180. At the time, it was going for, I think, $450 to $600. I would suggest buying at least a 580, unless you've got the money to spend $600, $700 on a flash that you may not use all the time. There's a lot of good ones out there. The 480 is not quite as good as the 580. These are older models, but both the 480 I think is a good used entry level flash. Not quite as good as the 580, but it's still a very good flash to evaluate. You can probably pick those up for $120 these days.
Okay, and here's a question on the previous slide from Gary Semeluk. He says he loves Jesse Alexander's photographs. He asks, how do you look at a subject and determine how to shoot it such that it's telling a story?
Experience. I don't know if I have an answer for that one. Just looking at, I guess it's like artists. How do artists portray what they're trying to do on a canvas? I can't draw a straight line without a ruler. I can't draw a circle, but I know how to take pictures, and it just comes sort of naturally on how to frame a picture, how to capture that moment. Wildlife, it's pretty much there. You either get it or you don't. But people, yeah, we're going to go into how to frame that here in just a second. It's deeper into the presentation. I'm getting a little long on the presentation here, but we're getting close to the end, Gary. Let me move forward on that, and I'll show you some of the things that how you frame things and what makes your pictures come alive. It's below in the presentation.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, what makes the picture special? Maybe we're getting to the answer to that. Framing. So one of the things that you want to do, this does not come up on your camera unless you call it. Mine does. I have this thing I can put in these things in my picture, but I don't use it anymore because I've just gotten so used to where I frame it. But what you're trying to do, and we'll go about this perception and perspective of trying to frame your pictures. You always want to try to have the majority of your subject in these circles, which will frame some of here. It could be some of here. It could be a combination of this. It could be a combination of that. And you'll see that as I explain a little bit further. This is what you're getting a perception, and you're getting a perspective of what draws your eye from over here, which could be a mountaintop full of snow. Why would you draw it back down to your subject? And that's what we're trying to do. And I think that may answer part of the question is, why is my picture so important down here, and how do I get people's eyes drawn into that? That's what I was just explaining that. The vanishing point, is it going or coming? Vanishing points can be in any direction, but when they cover this part in these areas, it seems to make the picture more alive. And you'll see some of my pictures of the Vietnam memorial that I took in Washington, D.C., the vanishing point. When I took the picture, I was trying to capture that, and it really did capture that moment for me. It was very important that I took a picture of that, and I'm glad I did. I really love that picture. Basic principle behind the rule of thirds. Once again, the thirds comes out in almost every picture. And when the artists in the Renaissance period started realizing perspective in the area of thirds, it just made their pictures really popping out and doing things like that. So here, as you'll notice, we'll talk about a couple pictures. The angle of thirds. This is how I shoot, but you can have these put into your, by pulling them up, you can always have your camera in this angle of thirds if you have a hard time lining up. Here is, we can see is a very famous bridge, and it's drawing you into the picture. This is the view, but this is what draws your eyes into that picture. It focuses you into that one area. Same way here, look at these rocks. that are pulling you into that angle of your thirds. Here's your thirds, like this, and this is pulling you up into where your focus is at. This is nice. This is like your supporting part of your picture. But here's where you were taking the picture of, and that's in that angle of thirds. Take that perspective, it's really close to that. So that's a really nice picture that the eye gets, you get drawn up into your focus of your things. That is what we call framing. And that is what you want to call what makes your picture unique, is these little techniques that photographers have followed year in, year out, and it just, it really drives it home when you see things like this. All right. So here's some pictures. These are my pictures. Here's one of those things where the focus point was the sunset, but look where the tiki top was at, down in that little lower angle of thirds. It's sort of like a little topic by itself. It doesn't distract from the picture, from our focus point, but it gives you a little setting of what was there. If that wasn't there, it would just be another sunset picture of the ocean. So some of those things, like you were just asking, what makes your picture unique? Use some forefront settings to give you an idea. We know this was at a nice beach because there's our little beach front. This is not important. That helps support this nice beach picture. Over here, not so much of a great picture, but the idea of this is your focus point down at that thirds area, but it pulls back into that area over there. Over here, we got our thirds also, but our focus is right here, but it helps explain the whole picture. We got nice clear beach, got a little boat we can go play in, and we got a background that sort of sets this sort of area up. This one and this one are our vanishing points. This is the Vietnam Memorial. As you can see, I didn't realize when I took the picture, but I got people over here actually in the picture because it was a reflection. Don't know if they intended it to be that way, but that vanishing point of it disappearing back in here is a really nice, I like it. I don't know what you guys like, but I like that particular thing. Here's my focus of the names. It just gives you the idea that these names constantly go all the way down. We're going down to one vanishing point, and then as you can see the vanishing point going out again. But it's in that angle of thirds, or the thirds type of proportion of where we're looking at. Same way with this one. Look at what we've got here. Our 1/3 area are here and here, but the track sort of comes in like this, also throws us this way. So we know that this is not our focus point, but the car is coming down through the curves. Same way here. This one was a little bit different, where the cars were coming up out of a hill, and I thought this was really unique because I was capturing the background a little bit and showing that we were at this unique track, and it's no longer there, but I've showed pictures of this, and people go that have been around and racing for a long time, they go know exactly where this is. So the cars are the focus. Once again, we're in the thirds area, but the background is sort of like a second picture, even though the cars are the focus. There's that picture of that Porsche that I told you I took. There was a bunch of cars coming down here, and as you notice, the road gives you an idea of through the thirds. It brings you into the focus of what happened here, and it brings you down through that thirds. If I'd have taken this picture as a car up here, I don't think it would have been as dramatic getting all this nonsense over here into your picture. Here's the track. It came down the track. It's off the track and into that focus of the area that we want to do. This is all nonsense parts of the picture. We're focusing on the track and on the car. Another vanishing point over here, as you can see. Nice beach area. I could have taken a picture straight out the beach. It really doesn't mean that much, but now we got a vanishing point. As you can see, we got a Y vanishing point. We got two lines, actually almost three, but three lines coming to a closing vanishing point, which drags your eye out, and it gives you a nice view of what you're trying to do versus just taking a straight shot at the beach, which would have been this way. So once again, here's our thirds area, and it separates the picture and makes it and it's sort of a nice view to do. This one, I don't know why it's not in focus. It should be in focus, but I can show you that picture a little bit later as if we want to wrap up or we want to talk about some other things. Here's was a picture that I want to share with you. It did not look like this. It was fairly a little bit brighter. And what I had done is I had a tripod and I set it to the right white balance of evening time, which was around 6,000 Kelvin. And I lowered my shutter speed. No, I'm sorry. I increased my shutter speed without changing my f-stop. I had it manual mode. I increased my shutter speed so that I was letting less light in there. Knowing the physics of light, we know in the morning that in an evening time, different lights reflect through the air differently and at different wavelengths are affected by the air. By slowing the shutter speed down, I let less light in, but that less light was the blues. It let the reds come through. And as you can see, I let a lot of red in here. This is not adjusted. This has not been played with software. That's exactly how I captured on the camera. And all that was just by playing around. I was taking photo shots on my tripod, and I just slowed the shutter speed down, and I seen that it was getting redder and redder. So I just kept on taking pictures of each time I slow the shutter, increase the shutter speed, which means less light. It would change the colors of all this. I could have done that in the software, but I think me saying that I did not do that in software, I was on a photo contest and I got in the top 10 of what they call untouched, unedited photos. So that's pretty good. About 100,000 people that were on that photo group. I got within the top 10, so I was voted one of the top 10. And so I'm really proud of this picture. I really like it a lot. This is not in focus, but Diana, like you're taking pictures of your flowers. I didn't realize it, but it was after, you can't quite see it, but there's dots all in there. And those dots were the water from it rained that night. Well, when I zoomed in on it, there's a little water petal part here in the petal. It was a prism. And when I zoomed in on that, you can see the grass in focus down below, about a foot down below the picture. It was just pretty amazing that sometimes you get pictures inside your pictures. So any questions on that part? I'll just give a quick information on this stuff is online. These are places to go to. The depth of focus thing. Let's see if I can pull this up. This is this depth of simulator. Let's see if it's gonna. I agree. Is that doing that? Yeah, there we go. Let's see if I can get this to where we can see it on the screen. This is a good way to experiment and not even have to be out in your with your camera. You can play with various things on this person. Here's your subject, playing with your focal stop, your f-stop. See what happens when you change your f-stop? This is a really good example, as you can see. I should be going slower, I guess. And then you can also play with your lens. They will change, there's your perspective of wide angle and telephoto and how the f-stop plays differently at different focal lengths. So if your meter, your person is further away, well, like it is in racing, I can change, see how the f-stop doesn't affect the focus as much because we're so far away that the depth of field is very far compared to how far that we are away from here. And as you can see in the example here, how this affects, this is your depth of field. So as I play with this, you can start seeing the f-stop, how it affects your depth of field before your subject and after your subject. that's why when portrait photographers, they'll use a very shallow depth of field at a specific distance. And they'll usually use around 8 to 10 feet because that gives them a very good 1-to-1. And they'll usually shoot at about 85 millimeters is pretty typical. And as you notice, the depth of field is very shallow. They can have a curtain back here. No matter what color it is, it's going to be out of focus. And a really nice spot is to have the face in focus, the eyelashes in focus, and the back of the hair starting to lose focus. We don't care about the hair behind her head. We're looking at the face. Same thing with the car, or the bumper, or the fender of the car, or the tail lights or something. We want to use and focus on just the tail lights, using the model as an example, and the rest of the car out of focus. We're trying to show a storyline that this unique tail light belongs to a specific car, and it's got a very nice artwork of people that designed this. So anyways, that's one of the pieces of software. It's online. It's not something you download on your computer, but by playing with it, it's a really good example of things to play with to get an idea of your types of f-stop, focal length, and your shutter. Well, this doesn't cover shutter speed, but your distance of your model and things like that. So anyways, let me close that part out. All right, let's open it up for some questions. Let me get back to this.
We have 2 questions in chat, and once we're done with these, I'd like to shift to the raise hand mode. We'll just have the folks ask their own questions.
Okay.
Gary Sumelik asks, what mix of lens do you recommend?
Okay, when I first started out, I had a 24 to 105. It's an f4. It's a constant f4. It's a little bit more expensive lens, which means it doesn't, as I go out to 105, it does not change the f-stop. Some things will go lower light, but as you go further in your f-stop focal length, they'll change the f-stop. So a 24 to 105, I like because it gives me good distance to the racetrack. A 24 to 70 is a very good lens also, but you don't have as much focal length further out on your lens. I also use a 50 and I have an 85 because I like just those focal lengths for taking pictures of people as the 85. The 50 is pretty nice out at the concours. We were taking pictures of just the bumper or the rear of the car. A 50 millimeter was really nice. You can catch a good 50 millimeter at a decent price for about, I think it's around $180, $125. I think Canon had it for $125. It's a plastic lens, but it takes really nice pictures. Another one that you may want to look at is something that's going to overlap whatever your longest length of your first zoom is. Mine goes from 24 to 105, and I have a 70 to 200. And then my really long focal length, it goes from 150 to 500. So for what I needed, I wanted different lenses that overlapped, and I could use them at different lengths depending on where I was on the racetrack. At the concours, when we had the Mercedes-Benz and the concours up at Chateau Elan a few years ago, I used exclusively my 24 to 105. I could be away from cars and take pictures. I could be close up on the fenders or the tail light. If I wanted to take pictures where we had a bunch of Mercedes, the cars were all lined up in a little bit of a circle, I took a picture down here, and we've got a nice picture of all these Mercedes, different years, but the grills were all different. But because we were in a little bit of a curve, I got a lot of the curves in that area, and that 24 was wide enough and good enough to be able to take that whole picture. So I can't say what is the best lens, but there's a mix of, you want to have lenses that overlap if you're going to be using a lot of different focal lengths. If you're doing landscaping and want to take a lot of nature pictures, look at getting like a 20 millimeter or even a 17. They're going to get a little out of square because they start getting round, but with software you can adjust that so you get the same perspective. But those things take really nice pictures. at night. If you want to take pictures of the stars, you'll get the whole gamut of the whole sky if you're into astrophotography. And that's a whole nother world. I'm starting to explore and play with it, but it's almost another world of photography. Go ahead, Gary.
Okay, and one more in the chat. Jim Fichetti asks, he says he saw bokeh on slide, B-O-K-A-H, and also on the simulator. What is bokeh?
Bokeh is that that out of focus compared to focus of your subject. So you've got your subject that's in focus here. The bokeh is the out of focus part behind it. So a lot of times we'll want to have a soft bokeh, which means we're taking a picture of our face or the car, and you want the other stuff to slowly go out of focus to where it's a soft background. So pictures of a bird, you want to have a soft background where you got your bird in focus. As you go further on, you don't want all these leaves distracting from your bird. So you'd have a shallow depth of field focused on the bird, and as the camera goes out of focus, that has to do with your quality of your lenses. Back to, I talked about the diaphragm that's inside your lens. There's a diaphragm in there that changes your f-stop. The more petals that you have, that's what they call petals, is your diaphragm closing down. So if I only have 2, it's going to close down almost like a square. If I have 5, you got 5 little petals around your circle, it's still going to be not quite as smooth as if you had 8. Really expensive lenses have 9 petals in them, and they almost form a complete circle as the f-stop gets smaller and smaller. That gives you your bokeh, which is that visual effect of something being out of focus, but yet giving you some coloring rendition. Let me pull up a picture here. Let's see if you can see that.
Okay, you're going to have to screen share again. I stopped your screen sharing.
Oh, did you? Okay. Oh, I did.
I did. I stopped it.
Okay. Let me go back to that and screen share to share. Let's see if it comes in. There we go. There's the picture that I was talking about. So as you notice, this is, I wanted everything to be focused around here. This is the bokeh effect. I still got my green, I got my little bit of yellow back here. We got something that's in a petal. It's not taken away from the picture, but it adds to it as a background. Does that help on the bokeh part? Let me see if I can show you another one.
Yeah, I'm glad Jim asked that because I didn't know that either.
Yeah, that was a very good question, and that's why I had that particular one in there. It gives you a good effect of what the bokeh does. And here's another one, that picture of my hummingbird. Now, I didn't stand that close to the hummingbird. I'll have to explain that I used a tripod, and you guys can do this too. I have remote control on my camera and a towel over my camera so it wouldn't affect the hummingbirds. But I was sitting in a pool having a drink, and every time I see the hummingbird there, I just sort of snap my picture. But as you can see, the depth of field was so shallow that because I was focused right here. When the hummingbird got in here, he was still in focus, but the rest of this was just trees behind it, which were, I don't know, 3 or 4 feet behind it. I didn't want that to distract from where my focus was. So when someone says, yeah, I love your bokeh, that's what they're talking about, is the background is out of focus.
Great, that's a great answer. And let's shift to raising hands for questions if anyone has any more. I don't see any hands raised right now, but go ahead and raise your hands if you got some questions. I don't see any. Looks like we may actually have answered all the questions there, Al. Yeah, I don't see any others popping up.
So one of my questions is, has it helped somebody, or did you get more confused?
Yeah, just go ahead and unmute if you want to talk here.
Yeah, just unmute everybody, I guess.
Yeah, we have, this is a small enough group that we're probably not going to talk too badly over each other anyway.
So
everybody happy?
Oh, I wanted to thank you so much for your time today, for taking the time to share this with us. And I shoot stills mostly, but I've learned quite a bit about how to shoot action shots, and I appreciate it.
Now, this has been a great overview of the cameras and everything. This has been so much better than taking a semester worth of going in. I mean, it makes sense. It ties together, and oh, you did a great job.
Well, thank you very much.
I
Thank
need
you.
to find some cars to shoot. That's the next stage here. So
Well, thank you very much for the nice compliment.
I like shooting cars because they don't move.
Well, you know,
pretty.
I'm going to transition to a little commercial about events, but let me tell you, since I'm doing the training for next Saturday's Concourse Judging School, one of the things I've been doing is going to take pictures of aspects of cars that we wanted to score. And so that's been kind of fun to do. You have to worry about depth of field, or you have to just go to Bring a Trailer and grab their pictures. But well, let me just shift to a little commercial on events. We have several things coming up. The Concourse Judging School for next Saturday is a video teleconference only event, and it's not fully subscribed yet. We can go up to about 45, and I think we're at about 38 right now. And there'll be a little quiz at the end, and we'll offer certification as a Mercedes Concourse judge. We're consulting with our National Concourse Chair, Pete Lesler, to put this on. First time I know of anyone doing something quite like this. So I think it'll be a kind of a step forward in training for judging a concourse. I personally think concourse is a very important thing for a single mark club like ours. That's why we as Peachtree want to promote doing this. We have a concourse scheduled on the 19th of September, which is going to be in Gainesville, Georgia. And of course, we'd like to see a lot of cars at that. A couple other things we're doing in the future. Next Sunday is our actual first in-person event of the year, and it's a small invitation show at Halcyon Development, and we'd love to have everyone in the area come see us. We've got about 10 or 12 cars that we're going to show, and we'll have a membership tent set up, and it'll be just kind of fun to talk Mercedes with our friends there, and hopefully recruit some new members as well. On the 18th of July, we have a detailing clinic set up for in the service area of the Mercedes-Benz dealership in Athens. We do not have very many people signed up for that right now, so those of you all that are thinking about attending, go ahead and sign up, because it's looking a little bit not very attended right now. Also on the 1st of August, we are going to do a karting event at Lanier Raceplex. We need 10 people to put that one on. We don't quite have everybody signed up that we need on that one as well. That's going to be in the morning. We'll have the track generally to ourselves for 4 sessions of karting, and then we'll have some type of lunch. And then that those that are really motivated can stay around after lunch and go into their public karting sessions. I tried out those karts. The reason we set it up there is because they're the best public rental karts I've ever driven. They will be a lot of fun, and it's very instructive on driving to run around in a cart, because you can oversteer and spin without a lot of things to worry about, whereas with your own car it's a little bit more of a challenge. So I encourage you, as part of our driving instruction, to come and do the karting on the 1st of August at Lanier Raceplex. Now on the 8th of August at Atlanta Motorsports Park, we have a urban survival defensive driver training where we use their professional instructors, their wet skid pad and ice hill parking lot, and we actually use a little bit of the main track for braking for a one-day course that is initially meant for teen drivers, but we've expanded it to adults because, in my opinion, we adults need this as much as the teens do. And even with my driving experience, I'm going to take this course again because it's not only useful, but it's also fun. We'll be driving our own cars for that. I don't have enough people subscribed for that one yet either, so I'd like to have a few more people sign up for that one. The other thing I want to mention, since this was a joint event with Carolina, we also have another joint event with Carolina, which is on the 26th of September, which is a rally from Augusta to Aiken. This is one of the types of rallies where it has a lot of questions that you have to answer on the route, and then typically a lunch afterwards. So for a full listing of our events, you can see it on our I've got the wrong thing written in front of me, on our webpage, which is mbcapeachtree.com. And you'll also want to follow our Facebook group, MBCA Peachtree. We record our events and we post them on our YouTube channel, which is MBCA PeachTube. You can also get to that with a link from our website. And I just want to thank all of you for participating today. We hope to see you in our future events, either in person or by video. And really wanted to thank Al for putting in together such a great presentation for us, and for each of you for your insightful questions and for just coming to be with us today. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Al. Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Diana. Thanks, everybody. It was good.
I enjoyed it too. Have a
Thanks.
good day, everybody.
And thanks for joining, Marie.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Let's see here.